Welcome, everybody, to 52 Living Ideas. We are continuing our series on Louis Sullivan's System of Architectural Ornament. Today, we're going to start with Sherri, and then we'll go to Rupali, and then we'll have some examples of the exercises that we've been working on. So Sherri, take it away.
Okay, first I'm going to need to share screen. And I'm going to pull up our next plate here. Here we are. So I am taking, this is plate 4, and I've zoomed in just on the top. I'm taking from Srikanth's idea that it's really good for us to read each of these little passages aloud. There's just so much content in them. So I blew up just the top portion of this plate so that we can read this all together. So this is the top of plate 4. Am I right? 4? Is it 5?
It's 4.
It's 4. Thank you. Thank you. And I'm going to start here at the top. Rigid geometry here shown progressing through man's manipulation of a central idea into plastic, mobile, and fluorescent phases of expression tending towards culmination in foliate and efflorescent forms. Note, clearly, to grasp the significance of the approaching fusion of the inorganic and the organic into a single impulse and expression of man's will, the idea must steadily be held in mind that the rigid geometric form is considered as a container of energy upon which the germinal liberating will is imposed by man's free choice, intelligence, and skill. The plant organism derives its impulse from the seed germ, and in its growth develops sub-centers of further growth. The seed germ may thus be considered also as a container of energy, forming of its own will sub-centers of energy in the course of its functioning development towards the finality of its characteristic form, the expression of its identity. And then, boy, there's so much packed in there, isn't it? Just in that little bit, there's so much in there. Oops, let me go back here. One of the things I want to point out here is you can tell he's talking about architectural ornament when he's talking about this form, this rigid geometry, branching out, or this energy that's liberating from inside. But you can also tell that he means more than that. And we'll get into that a little bit in the next couple of plates, I think, more in detail. But look at what he does in these 6 different pentagons. And again, we started this early on, like one of the very first plates, where we saw how the first one that we drew of squares, where it would break in and break out. And watch here what happens. We start with this pentagon, and we have a vertical axis and a horizontal axis. And then there grows inward from that these almost like a bowing in of the sides. Like if the sides of the pentagon were made of rubber bands, you could push in and you'd make this almost star shape on the inside. And then in the third drawing, it goes the other way. So you stretch it out even further on both sides. So it's almost like it's a ring of leaves that form then. And the funny thing is, when you see that, all of you, I would hope, see just 2 of those leaves together as a seed germ. Suddenly it looks like a seed germ, like seed germs connecting in a ring. And if you go to the middle drawing, you have another further level of detail that grows from that. And by the time we get to this 1, 2, 3, 4. The fifth one, second from the end, we have almost a flower shape, or if you were to cut an apple, this looks like the center seed source in the very center. Again, that's the culmination. That's where all the energy grows from. And then you can see how in this one, there are little branches that sort of come off of each of those points where the seed germ in the one before, you have the two cotyledon seeds, two cotyledon leaves, and that center part there, it's from there that the growth or the stemming happens in this second to last image. When you get to this very last image, you can see that each of those little stems has formed its subcenter of further growth. So this is the awakening of the pentagon. It's literally waking up to this idea that Sullivan has, that it's that impulse from that seed germ, that the geometric form is the container of energy. It's a very fascinating way of looking at geometry. Now let's take a look at the lower half of this same plate, the same sheet in this folio. And so those drawings that we were just looking at are just above this. You can see a few of the lines are coming down in the upper right. You can see them kind of sneaking down into the lower. But I wanted to be able to pull this in big enough so you can all really see it. And notice here the level. This is a further variation of the last of his smaller pentagons. There's also a circular form in here. There's all sorts of seed growth happening. Personally, I almost see dragonflies in there as well. But now that we're getting into these larger plates, I want to point out a couple of really important details. Always pay attention to every bit of text that Sullivan puts into his drawings. So in this larger section, over here on the left, we have the word pentagon, and on the right, it says inaction. So this whole plate is kind of titled The Awakening of the Pentagon. And this lower part, this larger drawing, that it's probably about 10 to 12 inches around this drawing, if you see it in the full size, it says here, Pentagon in action. And that's really the sense that you get with this. Now, I want to point out, pay attention to every detail. So I bring your attention down in this lower, underneath the words in action. There's a little note down here. And this is very hard to read on this when I blow this up. So I'm going to read that to you. And this note says, the rigid pentagon has vanished in a mobile medium. So isn't that interesting? He's talking about the geometry actually vanishing, because of course he's talking about the geometry as the energy source, and then itself vanishes in the mobile medium. The other little detail, and this is important for all the following plates through the end of the book that I want to point out. You'll notice just a little below that note, almost hidden within the foliage, there is a signature. And that is Louis Sullivan's signature, or his initials, really, his part of his signature, and a date underneath it. And I'm pretty sure the date says 2/22/22. And we're talking, obviously, 1922. And we'll notice as we go through the further plates, and I actually wrote down, I think this is really interesting because it gives us a sense of how long it took him possibly to do these drawings. He wasn't extraordinarily busy in producing commissions at this time. He was really more doing his writing work. So as we continue, this is plate 4, but like plate 10 is dated May 1st, 2022, or not 2022, excuse me, 1922. Plate 11 is like 22 days later, May 23rd, 22. And then we get plate 12 is dated June 7th. Plate 13, July 6th, a month later. Plate 14 is July 18th, so a couple weeks. And then we get plate 15 on August 29th. And then there's a big break. Plate 16 comes on October 28th, a couple of months in there. And then another couple months, we get plate 17, December 15th. Those are all 1922. And then the last three plates, 18, 19, and 20. 18 is dated May 15th, 1923. So we've switched to the new year, of course. But it's in May. So the last one was December 15th, and now it's May. Then we get number 19 in June 11th, 1923. And then the very last plate, which is listed at the very end as finale, is dated March 19th, 23. Now, that's obviously before plate 18 and 19. So notice when you're going through there, he must have marked it out, or maybe came up with that final plate and then realized, oh, I've got to put these other two in order. And what I think is really interesting for us to note is when these plates start, they're coming out every couple of weeks. By these last 4 or 5 plates, they're coming out every couple of months, or sometimes 3 or 4 months, maybe 5 months in between couple, there's longer stretches. And the last one we have dated here in this entire text is June 11th, 1923. He dies April 14th, 1924. So again, I want to emphasize the end of his life work that he is pouring into these pages. So I want to step here to the next one. I want to point out a few. I think these two plates really tie together and start branching. I love that. Branching into the next set of plates. And this is plate 5. And notice that it starts at the top here with these little boxes of really simple line drawings. These are axes, and he writes here, axes with or without sub-axes, selected at random. The text below this says, there is always supposed to be a main axis, however much it may be overgrown or overwhelmed by the vitality of its sub-axes. Herein lies the challenge to the imagination. So herein lies the challenge to the imagination. So there's always a main axis, however overgrown or overwhelmed by that vitality of the sub-axes. And so he's giving us this step-by-step process of how he takes these ideas, this main idea that grows forth from that seed germ, and how it can venture horizontally or even at an angle or curved off in a direction, or however, whatever sub-axis, whatever vitality grows from there. We're getting that step-by-step process. And if you take a look at this top row of very rigid line drawings and compare that to this next row, where it says here, these arrangements may be continued indefinitely. There is no ending in values. And then, of course, he ends with, remember the seed germ. But this time, notice what he does. We've seen this little drawing of the cotyledons at the very, very beginning, the introductory page of this work. We know he keeps talking about the seed germ in his prior works, in Kindergarten Chats. He talks about it in the Autobiography of an Idea. But here we see this drawing for the first time with an axis, not just a vertical axis, but a horizontal axis as well. It's almost as if he's telling us this potential can grow in any direction. And he's bringing us right back to that very beginning idea of the seed germ. What is it? How powerful is it? Where does it take it? And he's telling you the challenge to the imagination is it's up to us individually of where that imagination grows to. And this is the power of Sullivan's ideas, not just in architectural ornament, but really in any idea in our lives that we're working with. So I want to bring you to the bottom of this next page of this same plate. The plates, they're such large plates, and in these slideshows, there's such horizontal things that I like to break them in half so you can see a little more closely on each. So the bottom half of this same plate is this. And I'm going to zoom in a little if that helps any of you. I don't know if that works. Okay, so here we have the text. Again, really important to read all of these texts slowly and carefully with a dictionary always by your side. So this says, note, any line, straight or curved, may be considered an axis and therefore a container of energy and a directress of power. There is no limit to variation or combination or to the morphology possible. The main axis, in the parenthetical phrase here, of which the axis of the seed germ is here taken as the primal type. So what he's saying here, that he's taking the seed germ axis as the primal type of main axis. So I'm going to read that sentence without the parenthetical phrase because it's easier when you're speaking out loud that way. So the main axis may become secondary in development. A secondary axis may dominate all. Axes may be expanded, restrained, combined, subdivided, made rigid or plastic, or mobile or fluent in every conceivable way. They may be developed inorganically or organically. They may be developed in as stolid or as filled with the life impulse. They may be dramatized from the heavy and ponderous to the utmost delicacy of rhythm, the most subtle palpitations of life, but that all this be taken from the realm of the transcendental and brought into the physical, tangible, even psychic reality requires that the spirit of man breathe upon ideas the breath of his living powers, that they stand forth, created in his image, in the image of his wish and will, as demonstrations of man's ego power. And I'm going to read part of that sentence again, but I just want to step back and say, remember, always have your dictionary ready. Psychic reality. He is not thinking of like 1-800 call your psychic reality. No, he's talking transcending from the brain. That's what he's referring to. If you look up the definitions, you'll find that. But this is the poetry line that I love here. He says that all of this be taken from the realms of the transcendent and brought into the physical. To do this requires that the spirit of man breathe upon ideas the breath of his own living powers. I think that is just amazingly poetic version of exactly who Sullivan is. And again, we get his signature down here, 1922. And because every word he puts on is important, notice this next thing that he says. The student is again referred to Gray's School and Field Book of Botany for a simple exposition of plant function and structure. Now, he has told us an awful lot, Sullivan has, about plant function and structure, from the cotyledons and the very introduction to the way that plants form and branch and subcategorize, and new growth happens here and there. All of this morphology he's been telling us about. And so I happen to bring Gray's School of and Field Book of Botany. And so in a second here, I'm going to read a couple of things from that. And I think it's really interesting because I think there's a level of poetry in this book of botany that may also have been a Sullivan inspiration. But the other things I want to mention here is he also mentions the advanced student who wishes to investigate the power that antedates the seed germ, which in reality is a sort of embryo. They are referenced to a remarkable work by Professor Wilson, The Cell in Development and Heredity. This is also a fantastic book. I've read some of it. I might in future talks and future next week or whatever, I might pull up a few things from that. If I get a chance to pull out something I think is really ties into it. It's again, it's the work, it's the words that Sullivan was breathing in and reading in. I think they're really important to read. And then he goes on for further illustrations. See the following plates. Now I'm just going to show you the next two plates just so that we have them in our mind. So we're talking here about axes in these last couple plates and where the seed power is growing. So I think it's just good. We'll take a sneak peek at the next couple plates, and then I'll get back to Gray's School Field Book of Botany for just a few more minutes. So here, oops, I have to hit this one. There we go. Here is plate 6. And this is, hopefully next week I can squeeze it in a little tighter so you can see each of these. He starts with this little illustration, almost like a calligraphy P shape at the top. And its aspect of freedom is beginning to appear. So he's showing you in each of these little growth lines, A, B, and C, they're labeled. And so in these 4 drawings below, he's showing you if the A line were to take precedent, or the B line take precedent, or the C line takes precedent. And then this last one on the lower right is when he shows an equal flowering of all 3 of those axes together. And this is another one that I think really helps if you draw, because you have to get into that process of figuring out how this grows, and you really will get to see following each one of these sub-axes in this shape that he has at the top. And then in plate 7, this one I'm just going to touch on. So this is almost an introduction to the 1-page essay that comes after plate 7, and that's about parallelism. And this I wanted to show you just because it ties both into what I showed last week and what we'll probably talk about next week when we address that essay. But this values of parallel axes. And if you look at this very top illustration, it should bring to mind an awful lot of the stained glass work that we saw from Frank Lloyd Wright's work. But we'll talk about parallelism next time. What I want to do now is I'm going to stop share, and I'm going to bring up Gray's book. So I have not read the whole thing yet, but there was I was just reading this section the other day. I brought it up again. I picked it up again after preparing for today, and wanted to just, he makes this reference to this, if they want to find more about the way the plant grows. And of course, this is, how many pages is it's, over 500-page documents. So it really gets into the details, and it's meant to be, let me read the publisher's preface at the very beginning. it's describing the work, that this work consists of the lessons in botany and field, forest, and garden botany bound together as a complete volume, forming a most popular and comprehensive school botany, adapted for beginners and advanced classes to agricultural colleges and schools, as well as to all other grades in which science is taught. It's also adapted for use as a handbook to assist in analyzing plants and flowers in field study of botany, either for classes or individuals. And I love this line here, another paragraph down. It says, beginning with the first principles, it progresses by easy stages until the student who is at all diligent is enabled to master the intricacies of this science. So it's digging deeply in. It's not so dry and academic of a volume. It's quite readable. They've got a very excellent and thorough dictionary at the back. So it's a great book. But I wanted to read this section on seeds. The pattern, it's called a pattern plant. So he's talking about the way plants grow. And just see if you can recognize some of remember, this is a book about botany. See if you recognize maybe some of the poetry in the prose. This is page 12, numbered 11, which is going carefully through all the sections. And this one, we're specifically talking about flax. On committing these seeds to moist and warm soil, they soon sprout, i.e. germinate. The very short stem part of the embryo is the first to grow. It lengthens, protrudes its root end, this turns up downward, if not already pointing in that direction. And while it has lengthening, a root forms at its point and grows downward into the ground. This root continues to grow on from its lower end and thus insinuates itself and penetrates into the soil. The stem, meanwhile, is adding to its length throughout. It erects itself and, seeking the light, brings the seed up out of the ground. The materials for this growth have been supplied by the cotyledons, or seed leaves, still in the seed. It was the store of nourishing material they held which gave them their thickest shape, so unlike that of ordinary leaves. Now relieved of this part of the store of food, which has formed the growth by which they have raised into the air and light, they appropriate the remainder of their growth. In enlarging, they open and throw off the seed husks. They expand, diverge into a horizontal position, turn green, and thus become a pair of evident leaves. The first foliage of a tiny plant, the seedling, although diminutive and most simple, possesses and puts into use all the organs of vegetation, namely root, stem, and leaves, each in its proper element. The root in the soil, the stem rising out of it, and the leaves in the light and open air. It now draws in moisture and some food material from the soil by its root, conveys this through the stem into the leaves, where these materials, along with other crude food which these imbibe from the air, are assimilated into the vegetable matter and into the material for further growth. It is just this description of a plant setting its roots and growing, but it has this poetry to it. But if you read it also, he's talking about each of the elements, the cotyledons, the stem, the leaves, the roots, and you can see there is this elemental, this embryo of form follows function, this idea that Sullivan is gathering from all these materials that he's reading. And so you're seeing that very beginning description based in this new emphasis on science that's coming from botany and biology and a lot of these fields at the time, where you're starting to see where he's getting these ideas of form follows function, that each shape it has to follow its function. It gets its shape because of its function. And I just love reading that something like a botany text has got this I mean, obviously a botanist is the people who come into that field love plants, but just this beautiful description of a tiny flax plant forming its first stems and sets of leaves. It's like he's talking about his own child. And I think that is a wonderful way to remember. Sullivan felt it was so important in this text that he's using to remember again. I think this may be the second time in these 24 pages that he mentions this book or mentions Wilson. We know he brings it up in previous works too. But I think it's just lovely to read those individual texts and get a further flavor of what Sullivan is pulling from all of these books that meant so much to him. And there's lots of illustrations in here. Hopefully I can pull some of these. I can get pictures of some of these illustrations. They're much more seed-germ and detailed, botany detailed, but you can sense from them that kind of form follows function, that it creates the shape because it needs to do that function. So I think this is a great way to tie the two back together. And one of the things, I found the page. So one of the things that happens in this botany book is, let's see if I can get that. I don't know if I can, maybe there. Oh, hang on, I've got my background. Let me turn the background off. There we go. So you can see here, he gets into details about leaf shapes and their influence in botany. So these things were really, really deeply important in Sullivan's work. So that's what I have for the day. And I'm looking forward to Rupali.
Wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to do a brief interruption here because what I want to do is I want to share my exercise result of my homework before Rupali's. It's going to be fairly short. So what I was working on was the idea of inorganic, trying to start with something inorganic and trying to make it alive. Now, I'm very headstrong, so I usually don't take I take the exercise and then just do what I want to do. But somehow I try to kind of accommodate that. So like I'm completely focused on triangles. And so, but Sherri said, okay, do you have to do something else? So how do I continue to do triangles by doing something else? And it's very simple, it's the hexagon. So because I got this special paper, which is all triangles. And so that was first principle that, okay, I'm going to do with triangles. So so keep that aside for now. So I'm going to start with the hexagon. Second thing that I decided that I'm going to use only straight lines. Okay. I want to, because look, I don't have the ability to draw, curved lines and make it work. Again, I'm primarily interested in things like this right now. See, like this. See, this is the octagon, you see, that we saw last time, except that this is two of them put together. So it becomes, this is actually the shape. This is the octagon. And I like the way in which the patterns here work. So I wanted to work only with straight lines. And of course, having this graph paper, which is all triangular, helps. All right, the third thing I decided that I wanted it to be symmetrical. Again, this kind of mathematical way of thinking that I'm using, so I want to keep everything symmetrical. And then, given that, the best I understand Sullivan, he's focused on, there's actually so many ideas packed in there in everything. So I said, okay, let me take some of the ideas and try to work with it. I'm not touching the axis part yet, okay, because this is before axis. Okay, that leads to completely new developments, new richness that is possible. So I want to keep it to straight lines, axes, and then what is it that Sullivan talks about? He talks about the container of energy coming in, and then seed germ kind of going out. So this in and out process, okay? But I am partial when you're doing this in and out process is the spiral process, because there is a circular motion. There are different elements that you circle through, which is a very big part of how I think about things. So I wanted to bring that in somehow, okay? So I'm going to just now show you the result and then talk through it. Let's see here. So let's see. Okay, can you see it? Yeah, okay. I can't see it. Let me just make sure there. Okay, all right. So I started with a hexagon, okay? And the hexagon, you can see my pointer, right? So the hexagon is this way. See, this is the hexagon. All right. I also added one more principle of deletion. Okay, so once you've done that, instead, I mean, actually Sullivan does that, but Sullivan does that by overwriting things. I don't have the ability of the richness that Sullivan does, richness of presentation. So I had to do it by deletion, actually using the more advanced technology of eraser, of deleting parts. Okay, so I started out with this one. So I'm just going to describe to you the steps that I went through. What I was doing was that I was looking at the diagrams that Sullivan was doing. And in this case, there aren't that wasn't a large series. In the previous exercise, there was like, I think 8 or 9. This was only like 5. So he had this hexagon to start with. And then there was this pattern of adding this in. Again, his is curved like this, so I just converted it into this. Then he has something going outside, I converted it into that. So that was a straightforward way. Then he had things going out like this. So this, I put it like this. I changed the proportions. This is thicker and I made it thinner because otherwise they would touch each other. So this, I think, looks better. I think it has better quality. So I put that. Then he has stuff going on at the nodes here. See, these are the 6 nodes. So at the nodes, he had stuff going. Okay, so I just put hexagon there. So this is the idea. And then I put a hexagon in the center. So this is the idea of that. Okay, there are these separate centers that are going to develop. Okay, so these are the separate centers here. Okay, then I worked quite a bit on the edge first. So over here, then I just followed what he was doing. And he had growth coming out. Again, what I'm doing is that I'm trying to do symmetry. I'm not doing differences here. And here, so I wanted some kind of a pattern here. So this is producing something, and then there is another center from which things can come. Okay, so that it's like a placeholder. And this is happening at the edge. This is happening at the vertices of the hexagon. Also note in his diagrams that he's doing stuff at the edge, at these edges. Things are coming out from the edges. And I thought that I had to produce something which is different from what happens, so that, the edges are different than nodes. So it has to produce something different. So this is what I did. Again, I'm constrained by the that it has to be a line. It has to be following the lines here on the graph paper, and it has to look good. It has to be like a fluorescence coming from there. So that's how I put these things over here. Okay, then I started working on the center. But again, I'm telling you, I like the spiral, because what it does is that it is actually showing you, because it's kind of, spiral is simply combination of a circular movement. He doesn't talk explicitly about circular movement here, but that is there in his mind. Okay, and I think circular movement in all these forms is a very important part. And so spiral combines the circular movement with the radial movement. So you take things going out and things going like this, and when you combine them, it becomes a spiral. So I have to put a spiral. So I started out again following the natural lines here, and then I tried to look. Then I extended these lines, this efflorescence of this, right to the center. So from here, these little leaves are producing this thing out. Similarly, here I have a very complex form like this, leading from the edge of this outwards like that. And then I had to make that spiral touch at various points of things that are going out. Okay, so, and then I've completed this spiral, tried to look for the most interesting place to put it, so that the general shape is that of a spiral, but it hits the points of kind of connection of energy. So there is energy flowing like this, and that is being hit by this spiral. And the spiral hits here, 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 here. Similarly, for this part, the spiral hits, for this thing growing, it hits here, here, here. So there is this interaction going on between the spiral movement and these radial movement. Okay, and then the final thing that I did was that I realized that the spiral was muted by the fact that these boundaries were still there. So I just erased parts which were not part of the spiral. So what it does is that, of course, the shape is still there, but the spiral nature is emphasized. So that's what I had. So any comments from Sherri and Rupali or anybody else? Sherri, go ahead.
Absolutely, this is fantastic. Now tell me, because when we first talked about doing this, I think that you were, I'm not putting words in your mouth, but I think that you were less interested in doing the drawing than talking about the text. How important was the drawing for you in really understanding the drawings and the text in this work?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I have a very, very long answer to that.
Okay.
The long answer is that actually last time we did Sullivan, I took off and did a whole series based on Sullivan work, which kind of takes these different powers of man and shows actually kind of an expression, that the triangle, etc., is an expression of, it is a version of Sullivan's powers that you cycle through, that you have to use all those powers. You have to bring all of them in. And I'm always working on diagrams. So I had to find diagrams that I'm working on, which is capturing these, human powers and all the faculties you need to bring in order to make something. David Letterman used to have this one segment in his show where people would come and do a performance, and then he would ask the audience, is this something or is it nothing? Okay. So for me, it's like, unless they have all of these, it is nothing. So you have to bring in, it's an integrated way of thinking about things which is common to like Tao Te Ching, Bhagavad Gita, or the Gospel of John. You're trying to bring in emotion, unless everything that is, it brings in the fullness of thought, fullness of your deepest insights, fullness of your most intense emotions, and full action based on that. You have nothing.
Yeah.
So it's like, so that is the pattern. And then when I can take that and put it into a diagram, now I'm very excited.
Now, good.
So
well,
one example of that, kind of continuing just a little bit more, like what Sam did was to take the designs I had done based on that and made into the stained glass.
Nice. Yeah.
So it is kind of continuation of that thought.
Excellent. Now, two other things. One, Sullivan had an eraser. Definitely. You can see that he used it. We have a nice little tool. Maybe I'll bring it next time. In the drafting world, in the days of hand drafting, we have it's about the size of a credit card. It's a very, very thin, flexible piece of metal that has these little cutouts in it. And you can set it over a drawing that has an intense amount of lines on it and just erase a tiny little spot when you need to. So that's how he erases without you seeing that there was ever a line there. The other thing I want to mention is how much this form looks like a flower unfolding, this pattern, this circular pattern. I mean, we see it in ferns, so the little fiddleheads will unfurl, but here this looks very much like a bougainvillea and many other plants, flower forms that have their flower petals all twisted in on themselves in a conical sort of leaf structure that it slowly unwinds itself just like this. And so that's just beautiful.
Wonderful.
Thanks for sharing.
Thank you. Rupali.
Shrikant, this is wonderful. I think you really kind of let yourself liberate from the triangle and try a new expression. This hexagon, the center, has a lot of movement. The spiral, it's like legs running, and just that motion is there. The other thing this diagram reminds me of is Rangoli designs in India. They're very similar to what you've drawn, and maybe another day, another time, I can show some of those. I like, from the center blossoming and going outward. And then like you said before, every axis has its own energy pod from where more can happen. There's the potential of growing. And that's what Louis Sullivan talks about. It just flowers and continues to grow. It has a life of its own. So from the geometric shape, it's kind of broken into its own being. And it's for the interpreter or the viewer to interpret it in ways that relate to them based on their values or their philosophies. But it's a universal picture, right? Like, because it has universal themes. And I think that's what Louis Sullivan is also talking about when he says design according to the philosophy of man's powers. That when you design in this way, because I have been thinking about why is it important to design in this manner, and I did some exercises with my students too. And when you design it in this manner, then you're staying true to nature, staying true to the universal principles, and so it's pleasing, it has meaning, and there's so much variation, and there are so many possibilities when you design in this manner. So congratulations, this is lovely.
Well, thank you. I want to show you one last thing here. Then, I kind of thought about, Rob's point about changing the patterns. And that's a very important point to me. And so I was asking myself, what is it that is missing from here that I'm doing? So you see, I'm working on these octagons, right? Let me just stop sharing for a second. So I'm working on these octagons. Okay, so what is it about the octagons that there is stuff happening in 2D, and there is stuff happening in 3D. Okay, so now I said, what I want to do is all of those things, right? You see, each of these things here, you have these 6 now buds here, okay? These are children, okay? They have to flower in their own way, okay? I can go ahead and build things up, okay? So let me take at least one of them and see what can be done, because now the principle can be different, but it somehow has to relate. And the thing that I was excited about was the 3D one, but at the same time, I didn't want to put it on the top because it gets, it would get all messed up. So here is what I tried to do here. Let me see. Do you see a new one?
Not
No, same one. Okay, let me see. Let me try it again. Hold on. Or the same one? You're seeing the same one? Nope. Okay.
It's still loading.
It's still loading. Okay. Okay. Maybe I'm just being too fast. Give me just a second. Let me make this full screen. This one, and this one. Let me see. Screen sharing has been paused. Okay. I don't know why this is happening. Okay. Let me try one more thing here. Okay. Let's try one more this way. Maybe I have to hit resume here, resume share. Does that help? No. Okay, I'm going to share the screen and then go to that one. Let me close this one. Maybe it's interfering with it. All right. Second, there. Okay, let me go to the share. Do you see anything at all? No?
It's still loading.
Okay. All right.
Oh, there it is. There we are.
Yeah. So this is what I did. You see, I mean, I put those, it has to be dotted lines, but you can see that it is like 2D, 3D.
Mm-hmm.
It's very simple. It's just 3 lines, and then I switch over. Then at 3 lines, I switch over. 3 lines, I switch over. And it's like a, it's like a pattern. So, but the idea here is that I can take each of these 6 nodes, and I can build things off that. Ideally, if I'm actually doing this, what I would do is that I would do it as a set. I mean, this time, because the shape of the page that I had, I'd run out of, space on the either side. There is only one direction I had in which I could go. And so I didn't want it to conflict with the rest, so I could talk about the rest as a whole. I just sure that maybe I can just build this whole thing. So ideally, this thing would be built right here, and it would go at behind this. And similarly, I would build something else here, and it would go behind it. So there would be a pattern here, and each of the 6 can have their own pattern. So you can use a different principle for that.
Excellent.
All right. So that's all I had. Rupali. Oh, Rob, you have unmuted. Do you want to say anything?
I don't see Rob.
Oh, okay. Okay, he's left.
Coming in and going out, yeah.
Right, go ahead.
So, Shrikant, I want to say something about I like the word you said, children. These are children, because those nodes have the potential to blossom in their own way. And I think, that is the seat of power. That is the seed germ. And as we go further in the book, we're going to see more about how not just the one single axis or not just one single node, but when all nodes work together, they work in harmony, and you get a complete picture. And in nature, it just keeps on growing, and that's what Louis Sullivan is trying to get to. So thank you for sharing that. I want to start, let me share my screen. So I want to start actually with my outfit that I'm wearing today. In Indian fabrics, throughout ancient times, there's a lot of emphasis on floral motifs. And, from ancient times to now, you see the fabric is various parts of India, they have their own ways of developing the patterns, but they all go back to the tree of life or a floral pattern. So today is Diwali. I'm very excited about just the celebration. And here's my outfit for today. But here is the central stem. So this is actually a hexagonal shape with a narrow towards the waist. But you see the center, it starts from the base flower and has a very strong beginning. Like it just says, here is where the beginning is. And from that base, you have more leaves growing up, and they get more delicate as they grow. And then you have the two tendrils kind of going outward. And then there is this variety of flowers just blossoming from there. So then it gets into more and more, filling up of the forest, so to say. And the flowers are in different stages. There are buds, there are fully blossomed flowers, some flowers that are just blooming. And in the corners, you have, like at the base, you see the two blossoms coming in. On their own, they are going to grow. Going to grow. Like Shrikant, you said, they have their own potential to blossom. So I just wanted to share that. But what I wanted to talk about last time and what I'm going to focus on today is the geometric shapes in more mystical ways. Let me see. So I'm going to read this one paragraph on plate 3. These simple forms of ancient discovery and use were given esoteric meaning and occult powers by the men of that day in an effort to control, by means of formula and secret ritual, the destiny of man amidst the power of natures. With mystic numbers and other phenomena, they form part of an elaborate system of magic to which the world pinned its faith. So, in India, mathematics and geometry were quite well developed. And today, as I said, is Diwali. Today is the day, it's the darkest night. And there's no moon. So for that, it's the celebration of Kali. Kali is a goddess. She's a consort of Shiva. And you see, it's this symbol, the colors and the geometric shapes go hand in hand in these diagrams. So these diagrams were created to talk about, how the Hindus thought of their place in the universe. So you see the circles kind of show their place in consciousness. The squares show that you're bounded by the earth and the four directions, east, west, north, south. And each of these diagrams have different geometric shapes. So the triangle is very common. Triangle pointing down is a representation of a goddess. A triangle pointing upward is a representation of a god. And then when the two triangles are together, it's the idea, the Hindu idea of the male and the female energy in working in union within every human being. At the center is a dot. That's the bindu, or that's the center from where all energy kind of emanates. And so that dot is, and Kali. So let me tell you about Goddess Kali a little bit. So Goddess Kali is, Kal means time, so she keeps time. And in the Hindu mythology, time is kept in a cyclical manner, not in a linear manner. And so it's the dance of Kali. It's the dance of time. Things are going to go up and down. Things are going to come back in cycles. So the color, the edge is dark. It's black for Kali. Now Kali and Durga, these are two divine goddesses, and they together killed a blood demon, so to say. And because this particular demon was harassing all humanity and couldn't kill and wasn't being able to be destroyed by humans, they reached out to the gods, and the gods couldn't do that. So they reached out to the goddesses, Kali and Durga, and together they killed this demon. And so the color red represents his blood. So what it really means, that you have the power to kill the evil within you or around you. And so that's the color red. So that's black and red, and the white is for purity, just to, she's a goddess. So those are the three colors. So the colors are not merely for decoration. They have a symbolic significance. And then you see these 8 lotus leaves, right? The lotus petals around the inner circle. So the lotus is, it's a very common flower found in India, and it grows in muck and it rises above the muck. So and when it rises above the muck, it's still beautiful. It doesn't have any dirt on it. And so the lotus kind of shows transcendence. So just lifting yourself above everything. So that's the significance of this yantra. Now, these yantras, they sometimes might have words written in them to kind of to be chanted by. Now, this was somebody's diagram, like Shrikant does make diagrams, right, to explain. And, hundreds of years later, somebody's going to take Shrikant's diagram and start worshiping. And then you lose the significance of where Shrikant started. But then you just kind of become this blind following of, and when I grew up, I would see these yantras in the temples in my house, and we'd worship them, and I had no idea. They looked so beautiful because geometrically they were so well designed. But I had no idea until I started reading about them. This is Saraswati's yantra. Saraswati is the goddess of, so she is Brahma's consort. Brahma is the creator. In Indian mythology, the god and the goddess go together. They can't be one without the other. That's the union of the male and the female energies. And so Saraswati is Brahma's consort. She is the goddess for arts and music, for knowledge. So you can see, she is just, you can see the difference between the two diagrams. The energy is just different with these colors. And here she has multiple rings. Just, as you grow, your knowledge grows, you're going to get better and better, and you're getting closer and closer. Now here you see there's no bindu or no center. It's the invisible center. It's from nothing comes everything. That's the significance of this yantra. These are some of the Jain yantras, which are more complex. So these are the earlier yantras are from the Hindu mythology, and these are from Jain mythology. So here it's how do you go from your center. So in the center is the Tirthankara, and how you, there are three ideas. So in the lotus, the inner lotus circle, you can see, having a good character, the right knowledge, and the right action is going to lead you to being the best that you can be. So the idea is, how can you attain your own potential? And these diagrams help you understand the path to those, to your life's meaning. Again, here's a simplified version of the same diagram. Here's a little more complex. So here you can see the center is in two curvilinear triangles. Shrikant just showed us the hexagon. So you have the two curvilinear triangles, one upward, one downward. Again, it's the union of the male and the female energies within you. The idea is that the God in you isn't the God in me, or the spiritual embryo. Maria Montessori would say this: the spiritual embryo that exists in me exists in you. And Louis Sullivan would say the seed-germ, the seat of power, is in you, in me, in all living things that exist. So this captures that idea. This diagram captures the idea. And then you have the two axes, the vertical and the horizontal, which really point to the four directions. But the idea is you can go in all directions, and it's it's everywhere. That energy is surrounding you everywhere. That potential or the life force is everywhere around you. And then there are various scriptures that this diagram talks about. Again, you see the symbolism of the lotus flower in the center. So this is one of the Jain texts, and that text is being represented in this diagram. So these are just ways that humans have thought about how to represent life on Earth, or how to represent what you can achieve yourself on Earth by following these. It just gives you a concrete form to the abstract ideas that we have. Here's another one. I really like this one with the triangles, the inverted triangle and the upward triangle both together, and it has this tessellation that we've seen in Shrikant's diagram. Now, at our house, so we have many of these at my parents' place. These are all embossed on or engraved on copper plates or plates with 5 metals, and they have their significance. But these are good reminders every day to say, here's a way to lead life. So that's what I wanted to share about geometric designs. And when Louis Sullivan talks about, the esoteric meanings or the mythical or the mystic flavor to these geometric shapes. And then the next expression is that of the efflorescence that he talks about in architecture. So we've looked at geometry. Last week, we looked at 3 temples from from the western part of India, and the materials we've looked at are basalt and marble. If we go down south, the material is granite, and the stone is very different from marble. Marble is very soft, and it can be molded in very fine detail. This is granite, a harder rock to work with. But the idea is the same. You remember last week we talked about the temples being raised on a higher plinth, and on the plinth are these bands of stories that are carved in stones, in rock. And so as you walk around these temples, the plinth is pretty much at your, a little bit above your eye level, but you can see it, you can feel it, you can touch it as you walk around the temples. And you can see on the lower friezes, there are all the animals and plants. And then you have a geometric band and another band of stories about the king or the gods that they may represent, and another band of geometry. And then it goes into depicting the gods and the goddesses. But on top of the gods and goddesses, you have these elaborate ornamentation over their head, and it's like a door frame on each of those pieces. And then you go a little bit higher, you have another band of ornamentation, and keeps going up. As you go up to the very top, the roof has the gargoyles or the gutters from where the water is going to pour out during the rains. Next week, we're going to talk about parallel axis and repetition. But here's one example of, you see, you have the central axis, and it's slightly higher than all of the other vertical bands. It's also a broader axis. And then you have the narrower axis on the sides, but each axis in itself is complete. And on the very top, the ornamentation keeps pointing upwards in a spade-like form. So this temple is from 1240 AD. Now this temple is in the same area, same geographical area. And the doorway to this temple is just very elaborately carved. The entire temple is very elaborately carved. You can see, so when you go to this area, Hassan, Bellur, you will see that there are many temples out there, and they are all just equally elaborate. But here you can see, the doorways. On top, you have the curvilinear triangle going up, again, with circles that are like fractals, framing the deity in the center. And then you have the serpentine form, starting from the elephant-like creature or an animal that's opening its mouth to kind of form that arch. And on the sides, there is just this elaborate floral design. I don't want to call it floral. I'll use Louis Sullivan's words, foliate. They just seem to foliate from one stem to the next, and the stem keeps growing downwards and in whorls, and like the fiddleheads, those circles, tightly packed circles, and within each of those circles, there is more detail. And then it comes down to the deities and the guards that protect the deities. This is in that same temple. This idol is made from soapstone. So it's a softer stone for carving. You can see how fine this is compared to, now if you look at the foliate work on this statue as opposed to here, you can see the difference, that this is smoother than the one before. This is a statue of Queen Shantala Devi. She was a mathematician, she was a musician, she was a dancer. She was the queen of the king that ruled the kingdom at that time, and a highly talented lady. And so in this temple, there is a statue of hers. And I really like the frame that she is situated in. And I'm pointing that frame to you because we're talking about Louis Sullivan's work on ornamentation. And you can see there is a elliptical. So if you take a half ellipse and just the top part of the ellipse, and it's bounded by the elliptical form, and within that there is the curved stem or the branch, and you see this tree of life in many architectural or design elements in India. As I said, you'll see this on fabrics. I showed you my mother-in-law sari a few weeks ago. So this design keeps repeating itself in various forms. We saw it last week more in fractal form, the same tree of life. But it has a thick stem, and from that stem go the delicate or the twigs and the branches. And that's, Sherri read the passage from Gray's book about how does a plant go from seed to its flowering and fruiting stages. And you can see that, it's the thick stem that supplies all the nourishment, and then it foliates into these delicate forms. And then around that curved arch are those centers where you have the circles, and those circles are their own energy pods. Here is a detail of a frieze from the temple, and you can see, look at the umbrella like thing that's over each of those idols. It's actually called chhatri. Chhatri means umbrella or a cover on top. And you can see how, again, that semicircle is designed. There are three that we can see, the one in the center and two on the sides, and each of them is designed differently. So just the variation in form, what Louis Sullivan is saying is these expressions are our expressions, are the human expressions. If you look at nature, you see this variation. You don't see the same pattern in every flower. You'll see that there are so many different varieties of flowers. And we can do that in design. We can do that in our own expressions. Now, the expression in this particular book we're talking about is architectural expression. But you can do the same in art. You can do the same in poetry. You can do the same in music. You can do the same in dance. And that's what Louis Sullivan is talking about is for convenience, we've used architecture here. And that's what we are focusing on. But every human being has his or her way of interpreting life. Now, Shrikant talked, so this is a window screen. And Shrikant, you talked about each center having its, you call them children. And you can see there are these 12 different artists, these female statues in each of figurines in each of these circles. So each circle has its own center. Every statue is playing a different musical instrument. And then the bands that just around the columns are, again, they have their own form and own shape. We looked at plate 4, the second page, where we talked about different axes. these arrangements can be continued indefinitely. And you can see, you can have those forms that Louis Sullivan has shown in plate number 4 on the second page. You can see some of those forms here. And again, these are vertical panels in temples. And you can see how they foliate and how they flow. And there's the harmony between the human form and the natural form. Now, that's another very typical feature of Indian architecture, is the human form and the forms in nature, they just intertwine. There's not much separation between the two. Okay, so now we're going to go to East India. This is in eastern part of India. And this is in Bengal, West Bengal. So this temple is built in bricks. This work is not on stone. This work is entirely on terracotta bricks. So these are murals in bricks. This is one of the arches in that temple. And you can see that completely different region, different time period. This is in the 1600s. Completely different people and a different material. Here the soil is rich with rivers flooding the plains. You have a lot of silt. The natural material is brick. And here's an expression of human beings in brick. But again, look at the details on the recesses of the arch. You can see the same idea that there are these bands. You're using geometry again. So when Louis Sullivan says, take the inorganic, take geometry and play with it. And then when you infuse it with the organic, you make it come alive. That is the will of that is the power to will that he talks about in his prelude. Here's a detail of another arch to the temple. Now you see the columns are quite stout because the material is different. And with bricks, you're going to have a heavier structure, a lower structure, not as tall. But once you understand the material, you can then work with it and make it beautiful. I really like the door frame and the back recess. You can see it's very geometrical. So you have this curved arch, very delicate. And then in the back, you have a very rectangular design for the doorway. And each of those rectangular pieces has its own design within it. So you can't see it from a distance. So the beauty about what Louis Sullivan is talking about and what Shrikant pointed out, that each of those hexagons at the end of his design would become a hub of power in its own, I would say, own way. You see that in this. You have the outer, as you go inside, every little rectangle is going to have its own power and it's going to share something else in its design. Here is one of the rectangles on the outer surface, actually, of the temple. You see this concentric design. So concentric circles. In the center is Krishna. And he's dancing with the gopis. So Krishna is an incarnation of God on earth. And that's his dance with the gopis. The gopis are the young women. And you see this circle dance, almost like a folk dance. Again, there is the uplifted arms, the joy that you get, and all bounded within that square with small flowers all around it. Those flowers, that the detail around reminds me of Louis Sullivan's plate with the dots on it. So that ends my presentation on the Indian temples. And I want to go into the awakening of the Pentagon. Sherri, thank you for leading us through each of those diagrams.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm not going to go into that then, but when I was studying this, actually, an unfortunate thing happened. One of the teachers at our school, her father passed away. And all the children at our school made a card for the teacher, and all the cards were placed in a white paper bag. And I was looking at the paper bag and I said, what do I need to do on this? And I said, okay, I'm going to represent this teacher's a good friend of mine, her father, and I knew him. So I said, okay, how can I represent him? And so I drew this celebration of life on the paper bag based on Louis Sullivan's design, System of Ornament, right? System of design. So it starts with a circle. Now I have erased all the lines, so you can't see the lines, but the entire, so the rectangle is the bag itself, and there's a large circle that goes around. Let me see if I can you see my pointer if I do this? You can. So this is the circle. This is the large circle that I drew with a paper plate. And I wanted to show this person, and this man just loved life. He absolutely enjoyed everything that he did. And whenever we met him, he was always whistling a tune, always singing. He sang in classical music chorus groups. His chorus group sang in the same church that our school is in, so we would see him every week. And he would come down to our school and just share so much. So I thought his center, so in the center, now we looked at Kali, we looked at the Indian temples last week, we looked at the seed-germ. So it's in the center of every human being that energy lies. So I started with the center here, and then all these rays emanating from his center, becoming this flower. So I have the vertical axis, the horizontal axis of the circle, and these two other axes that I'm working on. So between all of those axes are these petals of the inner flower, and his life just blossomed every time that, as he participated in life. So that's the ever blossoming flower. He also loved food and wine and fine things in life. And I wanted to show that. So this is his chalice of life. And the fine things are represented by these tendrils, the fine things are represented by the tendrils, like you have in vines. So that's his chalice full of life. And at the base is what his life is about, right? That he was, if you look at the base, he always sang and had music coming out of his office. He was always whistling either Bach or Beethoven, and his life was in his lab. He was a chemist, and so he taught chemistry at a college, and so that's his life's work that anchored him, and then everything stemmed from there. On the two sides of this, the diagonal axis at the base are his love for the ocean. So on one side is the ocean, and the other he loved to forage. And once he foraged mushrooms and he gave them to us. So what I did was I took some mushrooms home to cook, and I left the mushrooms at school to collect spores. And this story remained with me because I cooked those mushrooms and fed my husband and my son. And the next day when I went to school, when I looked at the spores, there were also little creepy crawly things that had fallen from them. We all survived. Those mushrooms were well cooked, but that story remained with me, which is why I put it on his on this picture. But he loved being in nature. So on the horizontal axis, you see those branches foliating out there. And then on the axis, the two axes above, he was a family man. He absolutely loved his families. That shows his house. And as Shrikant said, you know, from those ends, you can have their own life. So the smoke that's coming out from the chimney is actually little hearts, and they're fractal hearts that are going outward. And on the right is his love for literature and poetry. He would recite William Blake's Tiger, Tiger, Burning Bright. And that poem is passed on through his daughter to our students at our school. Every child at our school knows the poem, Tiger, Tiger, Burning Bright. And I just wanted to kind of highlight that. And then the central axis just grows to be the man he was. And he was a true Christian, lived a Christian life. And so I wanted to show that, you know, so it's his heart. And so there's the base is the heart, and then it just grows into this foliating form and into the cross to show that he was a Christian man. So that was my drawing based on Louis Sullivan's system of ornamentation, system of architectural ornament, according with a philosophy of man's powers. And here is one man's powers that he lived his life on earth. So I'm going to stop sharing here.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much, Rupali. That was incredible. Incredible.
And I have a student here, Donald. Donald, do you want to say hello?
Hi.
Hi. So Donald, Donald has a presentation that he would like to do, but before that, I'd like to see if anyone has any comments or thoughts about my presentation before we go on to Donald's.
You know what? Let's do one thing. How about we do Donald's? Do you want to do Donald's?
Sure, sure. Give me 1 second. I'm going to share screen again. So this is Donald's work. Donald is a 5th grader at a school. So Donald, do you want to share a little bit about yourself and then talk about this is Donald's drawing.
So, as Ms. Sharma said, I'm in 5th grade, and I'm 10, and I like to read like a lot. So and so should I describe my drawing?
Sure, please do.
So, so I used a circle too, because I just thought it would work well with to have it all branching out, and it would look really well symmetrical. So I had the circle, and then I drew a vertical, horizontal, and diagonal line through the circle at about through the midpoint, and and then I drew, so I just did the flower because I liked the idea. I kind of got it from Miss Sharma, but and then I did the flower, and then I branched out. I made the lily pads that are at the top. They so I drew the house on one of them. And I drew that because I like to work on the house because we're doing a lot of roof work and stuff. We're like making the house look nicer, I guess. And I like doing that. And then on the other lily pad, I like to shoot my bow and arrows. And I put that there. And then in the middle, I have a Christmas tree because that's my favorite season. That's my favorite holiday. And then I did below them, I did these leaves. And then below that, I kind of started just with the leaves, and then Ms. Sharma said that it would look nice if I turned them into peacock feathers, so that's what I did. And below that, I have more leaves. And then branching out of the leaves, I have a book because I like to read. And then I also have a chessboard because I like to play like chess or checkers or any games, I guess. And then on the other way, I put the butterfly with the pencil next to it because I like to draw. Yeah. So that's pretty much my whole drawing.
Thank you. Thank you, Donald. That was wonderful.
Thanks, Donald. That was wonderful. Thank you. All right, folks. Any questions for Rupali, or any comments?
I want to thank Donald too. That's a wonderful drawing. I really, really enjoyed, and your description of how each part is important to you. I love that. And Rupali, I have a question for you on the brick temples. Are the carvings?
Let me say one thing about Donald's drawing. You know, there is a concept called mind map, where you say everything that is important to me, I want to put this in this little diagram. So this is a beautiful combination of what Donald is a combination of mind map and what Louis Sullivan is doing. So it is just wonderful because everything that you care about is right there. You know, you put it all there so you can see it at a glance. Thank you. Please go on.
Yeah, I had a question about the brick temples. Are the carvings made before the bricks are fired or after?
Before the bricks are fired.
Okay, lovely.
Yeah, it's amazing to think about the entire system that they must have had to plan, make brick by brick, and then put it up there. It's just a fascinating mural. And that's not just, you know, it's one temple, but there are many temples in that area that have very similar work. Donald, I have a question for you. How did you come up with these ideas?
Well, I pretty much, wait, what do you mean? Like the ideas for the drawings of like what I like?
Yeah.
Okay, so I just came up with them because I pretty much thought of what I really like to do and like what seems special to me. So yeah.
Yeah. And you know, I just want to highlight that because although all students did this work in our school, every child's work is different. And today we highlighted Donald. There are others that perhaps they might want to or might not want to highlight their work. But I wanted to share that every child's work was very different. Their shapes were different. They may start with a circle or a square or a quatrefoil or triangle, and their drawings were all different. And when Louis Sullivan talks about the power of imagination, he says in his work that here is the challenge of imagination, that all of us have the power. There's vitality in all the axes of the geometric shapes, right? You could make it into art, you can make it into the things that you like Donald did, or you can foliate like what we've seen in architecture. We could do it in poetry. We see that with William Blake's poems, or you take Tennyson or Robert Frost, all of them, Emily Dickinson. Gitanjali is a great example from Rabindranath Tagore. And so how do we develop these axes, and how do we develop those nodes that each have a power in them? I think that really Louis Sullivan is saying the greatest power that we have as human beings is the power to imagine. It is through our imagination that we create. And when, Sherri and I were both, when we picked up the book, I think both of us said, we have to draw in this. There's no way you can do this book without drawing. And we can see when everybody shares their drawings, how unique and varied their drawings are. And ours is such a small sample of people, right? But think about all of humanity, how many things have been created. And it's what Louis Sullivan is saying, when you create this for joy and peace, that's the goal of human achievement. And Maria Montessori says that too, Buckminster Fuller says that too. I think that's the common goal over here. So Donald, thank you for sharing that.
All right. Thank you, folks. So now, any questions, any comments? Jeannie, go ahead.
Well, I wanted to share what I did. And inspired by Shrikant and his polyhedra, not polygons, I decided to see what would happen if I broke out of a polyhedra. So I came up with this. This is a Stroopy style, but I don't think he'd claim it. So this is easier to see. This is a icosahedron, and you can see the 5 of the dodecahedron and the triangles of the icosahedron. But I really like the dodecahedron. And some people don't like it because they say it's no structure. And because you can collapse it, it wouldn't make a very good skyscraper for Louis Sullivan. But this has a special structure that's, I would call, breathable, because it collapses, but yet it can spring back. So you can't actually flatten it. It's the air goes in and the air comes out again. So I really like that. But to show you this one, so each where I have these red beads is where I made something sticking out. It's along the edges of the icosahedron part. And so here it is. And you can see it's moves around. I created kind of hinges by doing that. And so the thing has a lot of mobility and it sort of could move. So I decided to go ahead and, make it into a living creature. So I got the little head on there. So this thing can really move. I mean, you got legs, can run around, and things to grab food. So you need that kind of stuff. I wanted to show you the other thing is a few times ago, I had, and maybe you'll recognize it. Let me see if I can do this. Oh, how to switch my camera. I know I did this before. Can't do it. Oh. Whoops, leave meeting. No. Okay, well, I'll show you. Sure. Here it is. Switch camera. Yeah. So I had done this. Let me see it. Pentagon using catenary curves. And a catenary is a curve that's formed by a hanging chain. It's quite distinct from a parabola. So Galileo thought they might be parabolas, but they are not. Catenaries are. And I thought, it looks like some pregnant women in there. But I couldn't really come up with it until I thought of breaking out of the pentagon. And then I found out a place to put the legs. So here's what I came up with. And, you know, I have some women in there, and then I have babies. They're holding a baby in the middle, and then the bands around have sperm going around. So this is a real lifelike thing. And that's about what I want. Oh, I showed this to my family, and they said, we really liked it before you explained what it was. So that's what I have.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Jeannie.
Yeah. Jeannie, I love it even when you, I love it more when you explain what it is. But what I really love is how you put those catenary curves in the first drawing, in the line drawing, all black and white, no color. And that it was the idea that seed-germ that sparked a whole different direction. I love that.
My favorite thing was, you know, you moved to 3D and started building, you know, corresponding, because that's definitely along our lines of what we are doing with Bucky and everything. It's you know, he has shown us he has shown this in 2D, but his work, architecture, is 3D. And so to take these ideas and move it into 3D, that's fantastic. All right, Rupali, you had something?
Yeah, I just want to say that this whole idea of a breathable design is great. You know, breathing in, breathing out, and it becomes a living form. Again, taking the inorganic and making it into a living form. Very well done. I love the dynamic movement of the legs of the women. Again, I agree with Sherri. I like both forms. I like the static pentagon with the curves, and then I also enjoyed your interpretation of it, and how you used your imagination to make it into the form that it is. So thank you.
Thank you. Penny next. Penny.
Okay. Well, I'll just say, as we said, since each person is different, mine is much simpler than the things you have been seeing, but I don't know, can you?
Yes, we can see it. Yep.
So what I was using was just basically a rectangle and circles. And I had kind of like the flower in the middle. And then as it grew outward, it was more like a stained glass window, I think. But with different rectangular shapes and circular shapes and the way that they interacted, I thought that maybe it hasn't reached the fluorescent stage, but I think it's mobile. In its design.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Penny, I love that. I love the way that because I mean that's always the background behind Sullivan's drawings. There's always the geometry. You know, he went in there with his drawing equipment and made circles and bisected angles and did all of these things just like you did. It reminds me of a architecture school assignment that we were once given. We were all told to measure the width of our thumb, that dimension right there. So everybody in the class was different. We measured that with a little calipers, and that was set on our drawing as our base drawing, our base dimension. And we had to, through geometry, I'll try to see if I can find the drawing and make a picture of it so we can show it maybe next time. We took that one dimension and had to create an entire Greek column, temple, the base, the entablature, all of the curves, the dimension of the flutings, everything based off of one dimension. And you could figure the whole thing out. It was a extremely difficult drawing assignment. But it's usually those really difficult ones that are most rewarding. But it reminds me very much of that, because you have all those intersecting circles, bisecting angles and things like that. It's great.
Wonderful, thank you. And while this has been going on, my diagram has grown, so I wanted to share it with you. Because what I found was that I'm going to now have each of these children grow, right? If I were to make them grow here in the original diagram, it's going to go in here, and the integrity of this will be compromised. So I wanted to make sure that the base diagram is closed off nicely, and then you can see that the spiral becomes, initially it's just exploding out, but now it goes into the phase of rounding out to the limits, to the container. And then these are the little seed germs which are within the soil of this, of the mother seed germ. And then they're going to take off from here, because it provides for a very clear separation between the central and the rest. And it will have a circular thing, but it will be, half of it will be hidden, whatever the person, or 1/3 of it will be hidden underneath the original one. So that's what has happened while we were talking. So just wanted to share that with you.
Can I just share something about
Yes.
Penny's drawing? Penny, I liked your diagram. I feel like those pods at the end, the circles at the end, again have their own potential to do what they want. Srikanth, your diagram is now beginning to remind me of Escher's drawings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Marco said in the chat that it's becoming 3D. It really is. And I can imagine, say, if this were a tile pattern on the floor, that each outgrowth tucks partially behind the next, and the whole thing will feel extraordinarily three-dimensional.
I found the using of the triangular paper to be very helpful, because what it does is that it combines with, given that my limitations of doing the curves right, because the thing is that I like good drawing. So if I can't do it at the level, my mind really hurts. So this is like a best compromise for me. So it has a structure. And what happens is that because that structure is more precise, that symmetry has a far greater impact on you. So I think this works beautifully. So I'm very excited. And it's like, every time you look at it, you can see more things in it. And then I can go and look at this diagram and then look at Sullivan's diagram and say, wait a minute, oh, he's doing this. Okay, how do I do this now? And then you can keep adding to it. And there is really no end to it. Go ahead, Rupali.
As I was drawing my picture on the paper bag, I kept saying, so what do you want to be, this little pod here? And what do you want to be here? And you ask yourself that. And earlier I used to think, oh my gosh, these artists, they say these things, but are they just making it up? But no, I looked at the bag and I said, what do you want to be? And it said a tall design. And I said, okay, we'll go from there. And then these little pods, they had their own life. So the more you look at it, the more you can do. And you're only limited by your time or your effort or your imagination. That's it. That system lets you evolve your drawing more and more, as elaborate as you want.
And Rupali, that drawing was amazing. Capturing the person. That was really touching. And I think it's a great way of doing the tribute. And it's far more deeper than just drawing a portrait of a person. There are people who can do the portrait at a certain level, okay, where they capture the character. That's different. But to kind of capture who the person was as best as you understand it in such a beautiful thing, and include that as a part of the memorial and the celebration. That's fantastic.
Thank you.
Right, folks. So thank you very much. Sherri and Rupali, what are we going to do next?
My proposal is that we go through these next, is it 7, 6, and 7, we're starting to talk about axes. We've played with that a lot today, especially you, Shrikant. You played with that a lot today. So those two plates are going to be driving us into our essay on parallelism. It's a single page, but don't think that that means it's a light little bit of reading. It's densely packed. It's full of nutrients deep in there. It's like the seed germ itself, you know, all the nutrients necessary for an entire tree is packed in this little tiny seed. Well, that's what our parallelism essay is about. So, or that's not what it's about, that's what it is. It's packed densely in there. So we need to take the time to, I think, dig through all that and get everything out of it that we can, because it will tie into both everything we've already talked about, especially plates 6 and 7, but then the plates that follow from there. And the plates that follow from there are examples of what Sullivan is talking about. And so I think that would be an excellent thing for us to do next week. How about you, Rupali?
Yeah, I think in terms of continuing our drawings, I would say everyone should just continue with drawing. Take the geometric forms. You know, Penny, you're on a great start right now. All of us have something that we can take and continue. When he talks about parallel axes, so we've looked at the diagonals, we've looked at the vertical and the horizontal axis. Now, repeating that form, but then every form is a seed germ in itself and has the potential to grow. It's also when Louis Sullivan talks about parallelism, he's talking about, okay, let's take a break here and review what we have learned so far, because there's a lot that we've learned. So I think as we do these plates 7 and 8, we'll look at some of the concepts that we've already discussed, we'll review them and then continue. So in my presentation, I think I'm going to continue with Indian art, different forms that, you know, Rangoli is a great thing. So Rangoli is a design that's drawn on at the entrance, and it uses similar geometric forms. And when we talk about repeating forms, that's a good place to start. So I'll be talking about that next week.
Wonderful. I'll just say this. The next 2 plates are going to really prepare ground for us to fully appreciate that seed germ of the next seed germ, which is the parallelism. And then all the plates that follow are actually a dramatic illustration of what you can, take the original ideas of, energy flowing from the edge, the seed germ, then you combine it with parallelism. And combine it with ideas of multiple axes, and then of parallelism. What can you produce with that? And that's like 10 plates after that illustrating. So I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you very much, folks. This is just great series. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.